Right now, Simon, the cost of emissions is about $25 a unit, which hasn't really been enough to nudge businesses to make any major changes. When the price is 4 or even 8 times that, what's the New Zealand economy going to look like?
Well, I think for a start, you won't see coal-fired boilers in dairy processing plants, for example. There will need to be a change. Businesses will need to innovate. And so at those sorts of prices, it's realistic to make long-term investment decisions in low emissions technology. And the key with the Zero Carbon Act is that you've got 30 years to plan for, and you've got enough clarity and certainty to make long-term investment decisions. So I think you'll see technology changing.
So you've said it's not just the emissions price that matters to businesses, it's also the cost of adapting to climate change. Obviously that cost is going to be greater for some businesses than for others. What are the industries that you see as being most exposed?
Coastal businesses, and so ports and airports, coastal roads, the likes of Kiwi Rail running railway lines along the coastlines, businesses owning commercial buildings in major developed areas, all of those sorts of businesses will be at risk and exposed.
What about sectors like transport or agriculture? How do you see, the big picture changing?
For transport, we would expect to see an electric vehicle fleet across New Zealand, and so that would really ramp up, but we'll also need the infrastructure for that, for the charging and the distribution of electricity. So big changes to our electricity supply and distribution system to accommodate going to an electric fleet over time, which those prices will eventually necessitate. And for agriculture, change too. The big question there is how fast will that change happen? But agriculture, even if it's not in the emissions trading scheme to any great degree, will still feel the effects of those prices. They're paying higher energy costs, they're paying higher fuel costs, so they'll need to change too.
So we still don't know whether agriculture is going to be in the scheme. Was it the right call for the government to leave that up to the Climate Change Commission?
I think it's a good call for the government to do that. The Commission is a good test for the Commission. It's good to give them a meaty issue to deal with, and it will really test them and will really get a sense of what the Commission is going to deliver. So one of the hardest issues that they could be considering, they will be given, and we'll get a real sense of the sort of approach that they bring, their analysis, and how independent they are, and then we'll see how the government reacts, and I think that will be a sign of things to come.
So thinking about the company boards that you know of, are they all going to innovate their way out of this? Or are there some business models that are just not compatible with a zero emissions economy?
I think businesses will want to innovate their way out of it. And the key is that they've got 30 years in which to do it. They get the certainty from the Zero Carbon Act in order to innovate, in order to invest. So I would say that every board, as its starting point, will be to look at what they can do. So they will look at the options, they will look at their business processes, figure out what they could change.
So Simon Upton's saying that only agriculture should be allowed to use carbon offsets from forestry and that everyone else should have to get their emissions right down. You have quite a different view. You're all for as much trading as possible. Why is that?
Yeah, so I think it was a really interesting recommendation and a great contribution to the debate from the Commissioner, but at the end of the day, it would be getting too far ahead of where business is. It's challenging enough as it is to get business on board, to get a consensus. And so if you adopted that approach, then you would lose the across-the-board consensus that we need right now to bring in the Zero Carbon Act, to bring in the certainty for business. So I think it's a laudable recommendation. It may be where we are in 15 or 20 years' time, but right now that's not realistic for where we need to get for businesses to be on board.
So you've said yourself in a report that the direction of travel is one way here. We need to get to a zero emissions economy. What do you think about Upton's argument that if we rely too much on offsets and trading, we just won't make the hard changes that we need to make to get the emissions right down?
Again, I think the key is that it's a 30-year time frame that we're looking at. So he's absolutely got a point that we need to focus on transitioning the economy, and we need to do that domestically, but we've also got 30 years in which to do it. So we don't have to move immediately to the offsets being only available to agriculture from forestry. At the moment, it's about getting business on board and businesses looking at the 30-year plan and having a strategy, boards having that on the agenda and making their plan.
What impact would it have on these businesses if the Productivity Commission got its wish and companies had to disclose their climate risk, for example, in their financial reports?
It would make them very focused, and it would certainly make the boards who should have this on their agenda very focused on the risks. So, but business really needs to get across it. It needs to understand the risk, and it's a really important contribution that can be made by actually disclosing those risks. And then when the market sees, when investors see, they will start to make their own decisions. So the whole shift towards disclosure is likely to be a tipping point and see real changes in behaviour.
Would you support that?
Yes, I would.